One of my favorite things about the Steel Wool era of Five Nights at Freddy's is how the new games constantly call back to the previous games in the franchise. We have Help 1, 1, and 2, which are literally recreations of those previous games, with the main protagonist of Help 1 and 2 seemingly being the Bonnie Bully from FNaF 4. Security Breach has an entire area of the game dedicated to previous installments in the series. It also has the FNaF 6 location, although that might have done more harm than good, and Secret of the Mimic is literally a game set in the past where William and Henry are mentioned. I mean, come on. Although about Secret of the Mimic, there is one callback in that game that has had fans scratching their heads ever since its release. After activating Parachute.exe, Arnold can venture down to Research and Development, a section of MCM. Once here, he can enter a prototype version of the FNaF 1 location, and then he faces off against the Mimic and he has to escape by making the building's power run out. I'm sure you all know this by now. I mean, it's unlikely you clicked on a video about Secret of the Mimic without knowing what Secret of the Mimic is about. What you may not know, though, is that in front of the stage, right next to the Showtime button, is a camera layout, one from the classic FNaF games, but there's something off about it. You see, it's not the layout for the FNaF 1 location, which you think would be the logical choice, but instead it's the FNaF 3 camera layout, aka the FredbearFright location, aka not the FNaF 1 location. As you can imagine, this confused the community when it was discovered.
Showtime? Wait, what? Yo, that's a FNaF 3... Wait, what? That's the FNaF 3 location.
Because as far as we knew, the FredbearFright location didn't exist for well over 30 years. How could it be here? Of course, people have come up with explanations. The most popular one, I think, is that it's simply a mistake, because the camera layout asset is taken directly from Help 1, so it's possible someone is trying to find the FNaF 1 map and accidentally got the FNaF 3 one instead, and no one noticed. And you'd think if there was going to be a camera layout in the FNaF 1 location, it would be the FNaF 1 location. I find this answer unsatisfying for pretty obvious reasons. There's really no reason to think it's a mistake. Sure doesn't seem to make sense that the FNaF 3 layout would be here, but that doesn't really mean anything. Just because something seems not to make sense on the surface doesn't mean it's a mistake. And also, I just find it unlikely that somehow no one at Steel will notice this. So yeah, I don't think that explanation holds up very well. The next explanation is that this is another Freddy's location concept that is here because William and Henry gave Edwin a layout to, I don't know, get the vibes of the place, I guess. And this means that FredbearFright either is based on or is this Freddy location. And ding ding ding, we have a winner. Yeah, I believe this one. I think it makes the most sense. I mean, it's still a bit weird it would be here, like why would they send it to Edwin? It doesn't even look like the location they're currently working on, but I don't know. But here's the thing, I don't think this is any old Freddy's location that we've never seen before. Far from it. I think this layout belongs to one of the most important, most mysterious, and most interesting locations in the franchise. I think this layout belongs to Fredbear's Family Diner. And not only that, but I think FredbearFright is Fredbear's Family Diner. Make sure to stick to the end because this theory is crazy and actually has some huge implications for the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. But before we get into that, I have two things I want to say. First of all, I did not come up with this theory on my own. I came up with it while talking with Twitter user @JetTheJet, and actually they came up with the theory. I just found more evidence and I am the messenger. So major shout out to Jet. Without them, this video wouldn't exist. And second, I just wanted to really quickly ask you guys to subscribe. I'm trying to hit 5,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and subscribing will be a massive help. And you can undo it, and you can always undo it at any time. With that said, let's get into this crazy theory. Now you might be wondering, Zeto, what makes you come to the conclusion that this is Fredbear's and not some random Freddy's location? Well, the first thing we can use is basic logic. We know from Help 1's Faz coins that Freddy's opened in 1983, which makes the prototype of the location and the animatronics existing since the 70s kinda weird, but whatever. Anyway, the point is that Freddy's first opened in 1983. There would be no other Freddy's location for Fazbear Entertainment to send a layout of to the prototype location, but we do know that Fredbear's was opened around the time of Secret of the Mimic, so they could have sent the location's layout over. Why? Again, I don't know. Now, to be fair, you could say that the map layout here is because it's original plan for the location's layout and not necessarily an actual location that existed, and the FredbearFright crew found this layout and based FredbearFright off it. That's fair, but there is actual evidence for this layout in FredbearFright being Fredbear's that might convince you. The first piece of evidence surprisingly takes us back to FNaF 3 itself. While flipping through the cameras, the guard may notice the posters of Freddy changing the posters of Spring Bonnie, which is strange since there is no other Fredbear's memorabilia in the location. Now this can obviously be explained as the guard hallucinating Springtrap in the place of Freddy. I mean, I'm pretty sure the posters can appear before Springtrap shows up, but that could just be a gameplay thing. But there's also a chance that this picture on camera 4 can change to a drawing of a cupcake, and an even rarer chance that this drawing can change to that of a golden cupcake. We have never seen a golden cupcake at Freddy's before, meaning it most likely comes from Fredbear's, and it would fit since Fredbear's is where Golden Freddy comes from. You know, it has the whole golden kind of vibe. That's not confirmed or anything, but it's very likely that this golden cupcake comes from Fredbear's. I mean, where else would it come from? So there's two rare posters that are most likely connected to Fredbear's, Spring Bonnie and a golden cupcake, and they both show up only in Fazbear's Fright. Another minor piece of evidence is the fact that the way of accessing the Stage 01 minigame is by clicking in the walls of the building, and the Stage 01 minigame takes place in Fredbear's Family Diner. This isn't like how you access the other minigames where you click on posters or cupcakes or Shadow Bonnie, things that could have been and probably were taken to the location. No, here you're interacting with the building itself, and it brings you to a minigame of Fredbear's. So you go to Fredbear's when you interact with the building itself. This could definitely be connecting the actual location of Fazbear's Fright to Fredbear's. Especially when you consider the way you get each Happiest Day minigame is connected to the minigame itself. For BB's Air Adventure, you get the minigame by clicking on a poster of BB. For Mangle's Quest, you click on an arcade. And we know thanks to Security Breach that Mangle's Quest is an actual arcade game in universe, so this is likely Mangle's Quest that we're interacting with. The way you get Chica's Party is by clicking on Shadow Cupcakes that show up throughout the location. The cupcakes also appear in the minigame itself, and the way you get the Shadow Bonnie minigame is by clicking on Shadow Bonnie. The only odd one out would be Stage 01, unless interacting with the building is supposed to be our connection to the minigame. And the evidence doesn't stop at FNaF 3. Well, obviously, because I said evidence from Seeker of the Mimic, but there's other games too. Let's talk about Five Nights at Freddy's 4 and FNaF World now, because they are surprisingly important to this theory, especially the character of the Crying Child. You see, in FNaF 4 we play as the Crying Child during his last week alive, and the central location of these minigames we play as him in are Fredbear's. It's literally right next to his house. What's important to us are the little details we can notice while exploring the Crying Child's house, the street route outside Fredbear's and his house, and Fredbear's itself. A broken mangled toy in his sister's room, a kid holding up a balloon that is in a similar color palette to the Balloon Boy sprite seen in BB's Air Adventure, the mini toy Chica, the shadows of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, and of course, Fredbear's being a reverse of the Happiest Day minigame, and probably more I'm forgetting. These all seem to be connections to the Happiest Day minigames. Keep all of this in mind. Anyway, then the Crying Child gets bit, and was that the bite of 87? I will put you back together, blah blah blah, onto FNaF World. FNaF World starts off with the player in a dark void as a pair of yellow eyes continues the speech from the end of FNaF 4, which means they are most likely talking to the Crying Child. I mean, why else would they be continuing the speech? After that, they put into the game and blah blah blah. If the player waits to hit the done button while talking with Fredbear, he will turn into a glitchy version of himself known as Glitched Bear. He will tell the player to find a set of clocks, telling us they are breadcrumbs to help him find his way. Who is him? Well, wait like 30 seconds and I'll tell you. The player finds the clocks and may notice that they are actually setting up the Happiest Day minigames from FNaF 3. Putting Balloon Boy in a box. Stepping on buttons, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Putting cupcakes in boxes. Picking out the 395428 code. And putting Shadow Bonnie in a box. Holy shit, there are a lot of boxes here. Could that be a connection to the FNaF 4 box? I mean, there is that PNG of the box open in the files. Video for another day. After doing all this, the player can once again be met with the yellow eyes, who says, "We are still your friends. Do you believe that? The pieces are in place for you. All you have to do is find them. Rest." This means that the breadcrumbs we've been setting up the whole game, the Happiest Day minigames, are pieces set up for the Crying Child. And they are most likely based on his memories of things he saw during his last week alive. That's why I called them all out during the FNaF 4 section. It's a whole complex thing, so make sure to check out this video where I talk about it. Now you might be wondering what any of this has to do with Fazbear's Fright being Fredbear's. Well, it's pretty simple, at least to me. If the Happiest Day minigames are based on the Crying Child's experiences in Fredbear's, and we play these minigames in Fazbear's Fright, maybe that could imply some sort of connection. Now of course, the Crying Child is not only connected to Fredbear's and Fazbear's Fright. He's connected to Freddy's as well. However, his connection to Fazbear's Fright is definitely much deeper than his connection to Freddy's. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the Happiest Day minigames, which are pieces set in place for the Crying Child, likely based on his experiences and memories from his last week alive and from Fredbear's being so heavily connected to Fazbear's Fright, might mean it's Fredbear's. It's kind of like his memories are being relived in the place he died, kind of thing. Maybe a weak connection, but I definitely think it's interesting and something worth calling out. Fazbear's Fright could represent him being put back back together in general, with most of the remnants from Freddy's past being in one place, and the Happiest Day minigames, which seem to be his memories too. So Fazbear's Fright could be the physical representation of I will put you back together. I mean, after all, the minigames are called pieces, and what do you do with pieces? You put them together. Well, usually. I mean, I guess sometimes you don't, but usually you do. And him being put back together in this case would be his memories all being in one place. Our next piece of evidence comes from Security Breach. There's an arcade called Fredbear's Nom Nom Bites, and the title screen of the game depicts a burning building with the spirits of a bear and rabbit most likely being Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Now this is used as evidence for the FNaF 6 location being Fredbear's because there's a burning building and the spirits are being released. But all of this works with Fazbear's Fright too. The building burned down there too, and while there were most likely no spirits released, except for one that I'll talk about later, the remnant of the missing children were probably still in the shells of the animatronics, and any remnant on the toy animatronics, so they likely would have been burnt in the fire and released. I will talk about other evidence for the FNaF 6 location being Fredbear's later. And now we come to our final piece of evidence, and ironically, it's in the very place that started this whole video in the first place. Right next to the Fazbear's Fright layout in Secret of the Mimic, there is a pizza box for Fredbear's Family Diner. And now, to be fair, there are pizza boxes for Fredbear's all over Murray's Costume Manor, but there being one right near the map could definitely be environmental storytelling, making us connect the location of Fredbear's to this layout. So to recap all the evidence, the Fazbear's Fright map layout has existed since the 70s, and there were no other Freddy's locations we know of at this point, meaning it could be Fredbear's. In FNaF 3, the posters of Freddy can change to ones of Spring Bonnie, and a golden cupcake can also show up randomly, likely something that came from Fredbear's. The way you get the Stage of 1 minigame in FNaF 3 is by tapping on the walls of the building itself, unlike the others where you click on things that were likely brought to location and Shadow Bonnie. It should also be noted that the way you get every other minigame is connected to the minigame itself. Both of these could be implying that Fazbear's Fright and Fredbear's are connected, maybe being the same location. FNaF 4's Crying Child is heavily connected to both Fredbear's and Fazbear's Fright, more than any other locations in the franchise. The Happiest Day minigames are also breadcrumbs for him, and they seem to be based off his memories of Fredbear's, so them reappearing in Fazbear's Fright could imply a connection between the location and Fredbear's. Security Breach has an arcade game based on Fredbear's that shows a burning dyer with spirits being released, meaning a fire possibly happened there and spirits were released, meaning Fredbear's is likely the FNaF 6 location or Fazbear's Fright. And finally, rounding back to the very thing that sparked this theory, there is a Fredbear's pizza box right next to the layout of the FNaF 3 location. So now with all the evidence collected, I think we can hopefully agree that this is a pretty solid theory. However, there are problems for sure. The biggest problem, in my opinion, is the actual layout of Fazbear's Fright itself. Let's just take a look at it. It's all just hallways and there's no extra rooms. Yeah, this isn't what I think of when I think of a restaurant layout. I mean, sure, we've never seen Fredbear's before, so it could look like this. Sure, but I mean, come on. And yeah, I do think it's a problem. The only real explanation is that Scott just doesn't really care, which would make sense. I mean, the layout of the locations has always been odd for a kid's pizza place. I mean, FNaF 2 literally does not have a kitchen. It's also possible that there's more to Fazbear's Fright that we don't see. Think like The Week Before, where there are multiple rooms that don't show up in FNaF 1. Or the short story from Fazbear's Fright's What We Found, where Fazbear's Fright has a stage and Pirate Cove and all that. Definitely stuff that we don't see in-game. So overall, I think this is probably the biggest problem, but also a minor one. Of course, there's also evidence that the FNaF 6 location is Fredbear's. In Ruin, you can find a cutout of a 70s Freddy under the Pizzaplex, near the FNaF 6 location. It's in the same style as the Fredbear's Family Diner poster found in Security Breach. The FNaF 6 location also has red doors like Fredbear's does in FNaF 4, and they both have cars outside, which could be an intentional connection. It's also very likely that the place where Charlie died is the FNaF 6 location. Notice how they have similar alleyways? And don't say, oh, well, every alleyway looks similar. Yeah, obviously, but it's likely Charlie dying in an alleyway is supposed to connect to the alleyway where Mike finds the animatronics in FNaF 6. And as we know, Charlie died at Fredbear's in the novels, and if she died first, which is a very popular theory, then she would most likely also die at Fredbear's. And that is basically all the evidence for FNaF 6 being Fredbear's, and I think it's a very solid theory and one that I believed for a long time, but this evidence can be explained away. The red door could just be Steel Wool reusing assets, since those doors appear throughout Security Breach, not just at the FNaF 6 location. The cars outside could just be a coincidence. Charlie could have just not died at Fredbear's, and I'll talk about that later. And as for the Freddy cutout near FNaF 6, that could just mean something else besides implying that the FNaF 6 location is Fredbear's. What is it? I don't know, to be honest. I guess it could just mean nothing, but that seems unlikely. Since it shows up after Cassie encounters the Mimic, and in the Mimic's room, there's costumes from Secret of the Mimic foreshadowing that game, it's possible the cutout could just be further foreshadowing for Secret of the Mimic, showing us we're going back to the Fredbear's era. So overall, a solid theory, but I think FredbearFright being Fredbear's just seems more likely. There's also a theory going around that Fredbear's is the FNAF 2 location, the evidence being this line from Ralph during FNAF 2.
We don't have a replacement for your ship yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that. It was closed for years, though. I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
The part about contacting the original restaurant owner could be interpreted as Ralph saying the original location of the restaurant that they are in, which would of course be the FNAF 2 location. And I think that's a fair interpretation. But these two theories don't really work together, so my argument against this theory is that Ralph is just misinterpreted here, and that he is just saying like the original restaurant as in a different restaurant, but the same kind of brand. Although I guess it's possible that Fredbear's could be both the FNAF 2 location and FazbearFright. It would just have to be renovated twice. Once by Fazbear Entertainment for FNAF 2, and again by the Fright crew to make it more accurate to how it is in the 70s. FNAF 3 does have some strange connections to FNAF 2, as I've talked about before. Also, FNAF 3 has a strange focus on FNAF 2. The office has a box filled with the toy animatronics and Withered Foxy's hook. In 5 out of 6 of the Happiest Day minigames, we place a character introduced in FNAF 2. The paper pals from FNAF 2 can show up as Easter eggs in the office, but to be fair, so can the FNAF 1 cupcake. And furthermore, all the Phantoms except for Chica are based on FNAF 2. So I mean, I guess that's possible, but I think it's kind of silly, so I'm just going with FNAF 2 is not Fredbear's. And now, let's talk about how this theory affects the because it surprisingly has some major implications for the story. Let's start with one I alluded to earlier, that being where Charlie died. If the FNAF 6 location is supposed to be the same as where Charlie died, it can't be Fredbear's because it's FazbearFright and it burned down under this theory. That she couldn't have died at Fredbear's, meaning she died at Freddy's. And the bear and take cake to the children is Freddy and not Fredbear. And that would imply the FNAF 6 location is actually a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Which one? Well, that depends on if you believe she died during FNAF 2 or not. If you think she did, then FNAF 6 would be the FNAF 2 location. If you think she died before, then it's likely she died at the FNAF 1 location. Meaning FNAF 6 would be ending where it all began. Not the story, because that would be Fredbear's, but rather the FNAF 1 location, the first location we ever visited in the franchise. Or she could have died at some random Freddy's we've never seen before, which will be pretty boring, but it's possible. That would imply Charlie died after the crying child. However, it's possible that Freddy's and Fredbear's were open at the same time, meaning she doesn't necessarily have to die after the crying child. Although as far as I'm aware, it's never actually implied that Freddy's and Fredbear's were open at the same time, and I think it's much more likely to open after the bite. I mean, why would they confirm that Freddy's opened in 1983 if it wasn't related to the big event that happened in 1983? You know, the bite at Fredbear's, which likely would have closed the place down. Why not have it open in like 1982 or something if they were supposed to be open at the same time? Meaning she would probably die after the crying child, I think. Another thing that FazbearFright being Fredbear's could imply is that Mike is the FNAF 3 protagonist. This really isn't an evidence thing, but more of a narrative thing, so not as important. From like a theorizing perspective, obviously the narrative is important, guys. I'm not saying the narrative isn't important or anything, I just want to make that clear. If FazbearFright is Fredbear's and both William and the crying child are there, then it only makes sense for Mike to be there as well, especially back when FNAF 4 was the final game. Because I do think if this theory is true, it was probably the intention since FNAF 3 do all the Happiest Day stuff. It also seems like FNAF 4 is almost a FNAF 3 prequel in particular, with many connections between it and Happiest Day that I talked about earlier. So it makes sense for Mike, one of the most important characters in FNAF 4, to also be in FNAF 3. Like I said, this isn't an evidence thing, but I think it's an interesting potential connection, especially considering that Shadow Freddy, William, and the crying child, three of the most important characters to FNAF 4, are in FNAF 3 as well. Well, the crying child doesn't literally show up, but you know, he kind of haunts the narrative of that game. I just thought it was something to call out. And the final thing I think FazbearFright being Fredbear's could imply for the narrative is that the crying child may have been set free during FNAF 3. I mean, think about it. If FazbearFright is Fredbear's and the whole thing is CC's memories are stuck there, and FazbearFright is almost supposed to represent his memories being put back together, at the end of the game it burns down, maybe the building burning down represents the crying child being free and his memories being free. This can explain why he is never mentioned in FNAF 6 despite it being the final game. Scott wasn't just trying to be mysterious, him never being mentioned is supposed to tell us that he isn't relevant to FNAF 6. maybe because he was already set free earlier in the timeline. This could also explain that arcade game in Security Breach. The spirits being set free represent the crying child. It's weird that there's two though, I don't know, maybe it's not so literal and Spring Bonnie being free is supposed to represent William because he escaped the fire. The reason the crying child can be set free is because all his memories are back in one place. The very place he died. The pieces are in place for him. I think this further ties into the idea of Mike being the FNaF 3 guard because it makes narrative sense for Mike to be there when his brother is set free. And 3 of the 4 other important characters to FNaF 4 are in the game. And if you think Charlie's a Fredbear plush, she is there too, but this is all just narrative slop, not evidence stuff. You might be wondering why the crying child would be set free, but the others aren't, since they seem to be around during FNaF 6 in some way, thanks to Henry's insanity speech.
Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose, and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. I don't know how those tiny breaths of life came to inhabit those machines, but they will never find rest now, not like this. I have to call them all back, all of them, together in one place.
Well, it's because I think all the breadcrumbs for the crying child were in one place, FredbearFright, while the other souls were split if you believe that they're in Molten Freddy, which I think they are, but they would also be in the shells in FredbearFright. And we know they're most likely in the shells in some way because they're able to attack William and follow me, which they shouldn't be able to do if they were just in the Funtime animatronics. Or maybe some soul projection stuff, which is possible, I guess. Overall, I think the crying child being set free here is probably the biggest implication for the narrative, since it changes what FredbearFright is to the story. It not only represents Freddy's history and is basically a location full of trophies for William, but it also represents the crying child being put back together. It also gives us a much better ending to the crying child's story than FNaF 6 would be, because while yes, he could be set free during FNaF 6, so much other stuff is going on in that game and is just never mentioned. While in FNaF 3, he is connected to the Happiest Day plotline, which is one of the 2 main plot lines in that game, besides William's return. So overall, I think this theory is pretty solid, and I think it elevates the narrative amazingly. Even if FredbearFright isn't literally Fredbear's, but rather a building built based on it, which is possible, I guess, but I think it just being Fredbear's makes more sense. This theory makes what was already my favorite location in the series just so much cooler. I already like the fact that FredbearFright had all of Freddy's history, and it being in Fredbear's, the very first location, just gives it so much more aura. I also think this is an appropriate place for the crying child's story to end if it is Fredbear's, and if he's set free there, it's possible he's not. Now, I did really like the FNaF 6 location being Fredbear's, but I think it being the FNaF 1 location is also a cool idea. It's like what FNaF 3 would have been. It ends at the beginning, but in a different way, which is really cool. And if the missing children are set free in FNaF 6, then them being set free in the location they were killed is neat and a potential parallel to the bite victim if he is set free in FNaF 3 and it's Fredbear's. The idea of the FNaF 6 location being the FNaF 2 one is weird though. I don't really mess with that too much. Or it being random Freddy's location, but those are also possible. So yeah, I really like this theory. I think we should call this theory FredbearFright, as it's a reference to that fan game, FredbearFright. I think that could be cool. Let me know what you think of this theory down in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.